morning. Welcome to Bible study. Good to see you guys here this morning. We are continuing a Bible study series called Kingdom Prosperity, and spending a number of weeks. It's going to be a lengthy study, but looking at the issue of prosperity. In the first week, we defined the word prosperity. The dictionary definition is a thriving or a growing condition, especially as it concerns finances. And so we've talked about this for a couple of weeks. The questions, of course, is prosperity good? Right? You hear different teachings about that. There are some people that prosperity is all they talk about. And then, of course, there are others that teach that prosperity itself is not good. And then, is it God's will? If those things are true, then what is the path to achieve financial prosperity? So last week, we talked about the curse of poverty, breaking the curse of poverty. And so that's a crucial step. Now what we're going to do this morning, and then two other lessons, so 3 lessons, we're going to talk about poverty mindsets. Because poverty is the opposite of prosperity. That is the antithesis of prosperity. And so we're going to talk about changing poverty mindsets, or ways of thinking that keep us from prospering. So that's what we're going to begin discussing this morning. Go ahead and read our text in 3 John, verse 2.
Beloved, I pray that you may prosper in all things, being healed just as your soul prospers.
Okay, I pray that you may prosper in all things. Let's talk first about the mind and money. The mind and money. You know, the mind is a powerful factor in your life. And this is true in every possible arena. This is true in relationships. It's true in how you view the world. You know, I've shared this story. When I first moved here, one of the things I was struggling with communicating was I was telling one of the men here, I live in a different world than you do. In other words, I see things differently, right? We were having this battle, and if you're new, I'll share this story with you. We had some issue. I know this is going to shock you, but we had a problem with city power here. I know, you can't believe it, right? Everyone's in shock. And they were supposed to come and do some work, and they didn't come and do it. And so I said, okay, you got to call them and get it fixed. So I asked. He said, okay. I called. They gave me a reference number. I said, no, you misunderstood me. I didn't say call and get a reference number. I said call and get it fixed. And he said, but Pastor, but I called. What do I do? I said, no. I said, I'm going to give you 2 steps, right? First of all, this morning, you're going to go next door to Shaheem's. You're going to get a whole bunch of samosas, and you're going to go over there and talk to someone again. And then report to me tomorrow. So he came back. Yeah, I took him over, nothing. I said, okay. We were standing in the entryway. We stood outside, and there, you know how it is. There's always people walking. I said, see that guy walking down the street? Does he work for City Power? He said, I don't know. I said, I don't know either, but why don't you ask him? And he said, but why? I said, do this. Go and ask him, do you work for City Power or ESCOM or anything like that? And if he says no, say, do you know someone who works for City Power? And he said, and he's looking at me like I'm crazy, because I am, right? But I said, listen, you're going to stand there all day until you find someone that works for City Power or ESCOM or something like that to get this fixed. It took 45 minutes. He asked, and before long, he called, Pastor, you're not going to believe this. Of course I'm going to believe it. I'm the one that told you to do it. I talked to this guy. He said, no, but my cousin used to work there. I think he knows a guy. And he called. We had a guy there that day and solved the problem. And so the next day I said, listen, I live in a different world than you live in. The world that I live in, these things are possible, but the world you live in, it's impossible. Listen, money's the same. how you view money is going to radically affect your future. It's going to affect every part of your life. And so that's why we're going to talk about poverty mindsets. Here we're talking about the mind and money. Proverbs 23, verse 7.
For as he thinks in his heart, so is he. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you.
As he thinks in his heart, so is he. Or another way of saying that, you are what you think. Listen, what you think and how you think are ultimately going to affect every area of your life. Now, this isn't about magic, right? You know, I used to think that I was tall, but hey, look at me. Okay, it's not about magic, but it's about how you process life. And so, your mind is going to affect how you view life and finances. Proverbs 21:5.
The plans of the diligent lead surely to plenty, but those of everyone who is hasty surely to poverty.
Okay, this word plans is an important one. Probably many people's favorite and certainly one of the most well-known scriptures in the Bible is Jeremiah 29:11. And we always say, we interpret it, the thoughts that I think towards you, but that's not actually what it says. It's the same original word. He says, the plans that I have for you are good plans. But it's the word, it talks about thoughts. Thoughts are your plans, right? You always think before you do something, or at least you should, right? Your thoughts are your plans. So here he's saying your plans or your thoughts will affect your outcome. The plans. The thoughts of the diligent lead to plenty, but those that are hasty, they're in a hurry, it leads to poverty. In other words, those that are hasty, these are people who take financial shortcuts, people who aren't thinking about the future. This is going to lead to poverty. Then, of course, your mind affects your decisions and your actions concerning finances. Proverbs 28:19, this is in the New International Version.
A hard worker has plenty of food, but a person who chases fantasies ends up in poverty.
A hard worker has food, but a person who chases fantasies ends up in poverty. Is he saying the person who reads fiction novels ends up in poverty? No. But think about the context. There's two men, one of them works hard and the other one fantasizes. What is he fantasizing about? About money. He's fantasizing about, well, you know, I bet if I did this. And he never actually does it. Let me share a story with you. Years ago, I would have been 16 or 17. I forget exactly, but I was working for a man. We did hardwood floors, and he got a side job. One of his customers wanted him to do some landscaping in his backyard. So he hired me and my friend to help him with this landscaping. Now, in the backyard, it was like a hill that went up, and it was filled with this river rock. I don't know how you categorize it here, but in the U.S., if you buy like rock for your yard, it's by the size. This was 6-inch river rock. That means they're rocks about this big. And the yard was filled with them. Our job was just to get the rocks out of there. He gave us 2 shovels. He gave us 2 wheelbarrows. You just got to get the rocks into the front, and I'm going to pay you. And that's a lot of hard work, right? I mean, it's like tens of thousands. The yard was bigger than this whole building, including the prayer room. It was a big area full of rocks. And so what we did was not start moving rocks. You know what we did is we started making plans. First, we thought it was a hill. We thought, you know what we do? If we get up to the top and we just start throwing all the rocks down to the bottom, right? That's step one, right? And so we started, and then after all, like, this is not working, right? Then we thought, okay, I'll throw the rocks here. You grab them, you throw them to the front, right? There's just so many. And so at the end of the first day, we get done. He comes to check on us, and it honestly looked like we had done nothing, because we had essentially done nothing. That's exactly what, I don't know what happened to the scripture. It went away. Can you put it back up there? Proverbs 28:19. Don't move on until it's time to move on. One man who works, he gets the job done. The other one who's trying to figure out a better way all the time and never actually does it. You know what, Pastor? You know what I'm going to do? I found this new website. And what they'll do is they'll take your CV and they'll send it to 10,000 different places. It's way better than actually looking for a job. Right? There's one person who has plenty of food, but the one who chases fantasies ends up in poverty. So it's how you think. So listen. There's lots of people that have poverty mindsets. The word poverty means a deficiency, impoverishment, not having enough. They have mindsets like this. There are thinking patterns based on poverty or in line with poverty. I mentioned last week, Ruby Payne wrote the book, A Framework for Understanding Poverty. She made the statement, poverty is a mindset. People in poverty think differently than those with wealth. So think about the mindsets that we all have about money. We all have ways of thinking, right? Everyone in this room, we have a belief or a mindset about what I should have. I don't know what it is, but I know you've got one. You have a belief, what should I have? Maybe you think that what you have is enough, right? Maybe you think you shouldn't have more. Maybe you think you need more. I don't know what it is, but you have a mindset about that. What should I have? Every one of us, we have an internal answer or a mindset to the question, what is money for? Or what is the purpose of money? Right? We have an answer to the question, what should I do with more money, right? If you were to be given today a large sum of money, you have already answered the question, what would I do with that money? Why? Because we all think about that. What would I do if I had 10,000 rand right now, right? What would I do, if it was only 5,000? What would I do if it was, right? We've all answered that question. These are mindsets. There's a mindset you have about confidence and money. Can you be confident that God will bless you, or confident in your finances? Here is the problem, is that poverty mindsets, see, we all have those mindsets. Rich people have answer the same questions. What would I do if I had more money? Can I be confident? Is it okay to have more? Wealthy people answer all the same questions. The problem is when you have a poverty mindset, you answer the questions wrong. It's all the same question, but the poverty mindset answers the questions incorrectly. You don't view money correctly, or they don't decide correctly. Sometimes money torments people rather than blesses them. Proverbs 10, verse 22.
The blessing of the Lord makes one rich, and he adds no sorrow with it.
What's fascinating to me over the years that I've been a pastor is the number of times I've had people come to me who are distraught over blessing. And that's strange to me. That's odd. Because we pray for blessing. I've had people that, Pastor, I've been praying, I need a new job, I need blessing. And the same person will come to me, Pastor, I don't know what to do. God is blessing me, and I don't feel comfortable with it. That's weird. Because the Bible says when God blesses you, he doesn't give you sorrow. So if you have sorrow from blessing, that's coming from somewhere else. It's very likely that's coming from a wrong mindset. So let's talk for a moment about the source of poverty mindsets. The source of poverty mindsets. Number one could be past trauma in money. I think this question came up in our first lesson, but let's be real. Most of us, at some point in our life, we have been in a period or a season or a prolonged time of financial trauma. Times when you did not have enough, when maybe you couldn't eat properly, or you couldn't take care of your children or family. Times when you couldn't meet basic needs. Prolonged lack. There are people that legitimately, you have been hungry. Maybe you've been homeless. Some of you have shared your testimony with you, seasons where you had no place to live. Maybe constant moving. due to financial problems. I have not a lot of memories of my young childhood. All the ones I have are bad ones. Some of the things that I remember being young, and young, I mean, under the age of 7 or so. I remember several times moving house in the middle of the night. Now, that was normal to me, but when you get older, then you realize, oh, that's probably not how you're supposed to move house, right? I remember my parents would be, hey, listen, guess what? What? We're moving. What? Right now? Yeah, come on. My mom's like folding up my blankets. That's strange, right? I remember one time in the middle of the night moving out of our home into my grandparents' home. Right? As a kid, hey, I love grandma and grandpa, but then you realize that's a problem. That's not the way it's supposed to be. I remember probably my earliest memory in life is this beautiful home. At least that's the way it seemed to me. And I know we were moving out because I was getting yelled at. I was playing with, I don't know what they call it. You know those things that you lay on to go underneath the car to work on it? I was playing on one of those. My dad was yelling at me. I didn't discover until a few years later the reason we were moving that day was because the bank was repossessing the house. All of my earliest memories in life were about financial trauma. And I wasn't able to identify that until later on in life, that some of the decisions I made, they were tainted by that. So these things can give you a poverty mindset. Your view of money can be traumatic, right? It's emotional. If you get any, you've got to hold it as tight as you can, or it's bad decisions, inability to do what's right. Many people, you make your financial decisions based on one very simple thought: I don't ever want to feel like that again. If you've ever felt like I can't pay my bills, now every decision you make is based on I don't ever want to feel like that again. So this is trauma that has caused us to view our finances in a certain way. Again, from Ruby Payne, she said, families in poverty tend to teach and reinforce wrong thinking about money. And so then what we have here is, and this is not a technical term, but I'm using this term to help us understand what we call generational poverty. I understand that there is situational poverty. The reality of the world we live in, there are people that you were born into a situation where there simply was not enough. That is situational poverty. Or maybe the company closed down, the house was repossessed or burned down, right? And someone from Eldos, I'm sure, stole your car, right? That is situational poverty. If you have lost everything because of a situation, that doesn't mean that there is, what's wrong with your brain? I get that. There is situational poverty. But what most people deal with long term, and what hurts us the most, is not situational poverty. It's generational poverty. It's something that is it is repeated over and over again. It's a way of thinking, a way of living life. It's something that is passed down among family members for generations. So we see past trauma can be a source of poverty mindsets. Then, of course, wrong teaching about money can create poverty mindsets, right? The idea that money is evil. That's a misquoting of 1 Timothy, right? 1 Timothy says the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, but some people believe and teach that money is the root of evil. We talked about this, I think, last week or the week before. Some people believe that being poor is spiritual, that God is somehow pleased with you if you, the poorer you are. And that's, of course, we dealt with that. Then why were there so many wealthy people in the Bible that God blessed? Right? This is a logical conundrum, of course. Then, of course, there are some people, they believe that poverty has, mysterious refining qualities, right? And that's not just true about poverty. A lot of Christians believe this about a lot of things, right? I wasn't there, but I heard a great report from the Healing Crusade this weekend. What's interesting about sickness is you'll meet some Christians who say, the Lord, He's just really been working on me through my sickness. Okay. How? Oh, He's just been helping me. He's working on me. He's refining me. The problem is that we can never give specifics. How is it, right? What is the Lord, so you got sick. How is the Lord helping you through sickness? He's helping my faith. Really, how? Explain it to me. Draw it on a piece of paper, how feeling miserable helps your faith. Right? It's always mysterious. You can't define it. And that's also true in poverty. There are some people that they really believe, poverty is it's working on me, it's strengthening me, it's teaching me some things, right? I'm sorry, I reject that. First of all, it's not biblical, which is the simplest way to reject something, but it also just doesn't make sense, right? Let's be honest. I know some very good-hearted, very spiritual people who also are quite wealthy. Right? I have some friends in the U.S. that God has blessed them abundantly, but they are humble, they are righteous, they serve God, they're involved in ministry. You know what? I also know some wealthy people that are not very spiritual. But on the other side, I know some people who are not wealthy that are very spiritual, they're good-hearted, wonderful people, but I also know poor people who are not spiritual or good-hearted. I know some people that go to church and they're always mad at God because of what they think God has done in their finances. They've got a bad heart. The point is, your amount of money has no connection to your spirituality, whether it's a lot or a little. So there's wrong teaching about money. Then, of course, there's emotional insecurity, or really it's about rejection. All right, many people have received in their life negative messages of worth. Your worth is damaged, and so your view of money is twisted. It's based on what you view your worth. Luke 15:19.
And I'm no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant.
This young man, because he felt that he was worth less, he really believed that he did not even deserve financial blessing. He really believed that. That's the message, right? This is the son. He took his inheritance, ran away, wasted it, and then he came back. And remember, this is a parable. He's talking about the heart of God and the heart of his people. This man goes back to God and he says, you know what, I'm so worthless. Just let me be poor. I'll just be poor in your kingdom. That's all I want. I was talking to a dear lady who loves God some time ago, and she told me she prayed a prayer like that. She said, you know what? I just told God, I don't even need a lot. I don't even, just as long as I have my meal today, I'm fine. God, if you would just accept me. Listen, that's a prayer of rejection. You're saying, God, I know you don't care for me because I don't think I have any worth, so just let me be poor. And so there are people that because of that, you've developed poverty mindsets. Of course, we see that on the other side as well, and this is closely linked. One of the other poverty mindsets is trying to use money to prove your worth, right? I think I told the story a couple of weeks ago. The first time I got paid, I cashed my check in small bills, so I had a big fat, right? And walking around with my pocket, I was 14 years old. Could you imagine? I mean, look at me now. Imagine me at 14. I was like, hey guys, how's it going? Right? But my worth was wrapped up in that. If I could buy something, if I could do something. And so we see that as well, right? That's why you see people that they live in a crummy home, right? Or they can't, their kids don't even have nice shoes to go to school, but they got a nice car, right? Or right? And you find this in every status, right? Maybe it's a little less than that. You don't have a nice car. You can hardly eat, right? But your kids have got name brand shoes, right? They're wearing their Jonathan D's, right? Right? You don't have anything else going on in life. Can't even pay for airtime. But I want people to look at my kids and say, so this is a poverty mindset. We are trying to make our worth, we're trying to demonstrate our worth in finances. So these are some of the sources of poverty mindsets. Let's stop for a moment. I want to open for questions this morning before we move on. And we'll begin talking about some of the poverty mindsets. If you've got a question so far, just raise your hand. Let me see it, so I can call on you. Okay, Nandi?
Pastor, so I just want to ask you something quickly.
Uh-huh.
I remember it was, I think 4 years ago, when I had my first job, and I used to pray and ask God, like just tell him I want to be a blessing upon someone's life. And then life happened, I didn't have a job, and I found myself like in a very sticky financial situation where I was like super broke. And so I had this weird thing in my mind. I kept on like going back to that prayer, and I don't know, my mind was like confused. I was saying maybe God wants me to like go through, like put me in, people's shoes, like this person who I'm going to bless. Maybe he wants me to be in their shoes so that I can understand what they're going through. Is that twisted or?
Well, you got to split that thought up. First of all, the simple answer to your question is no. God does not want you to suffer so that you understand, right? But sometimes God allows suffering so that we can understand. It's better if we would just be humble. Wouldn't that be great? If we could just say, God, make me humble. But unfortunately for a lot of us, you might be a little bit like me. I've got a thick skull. And humility in my life, I've discovered, unfortunately, is usually taught in painful ways. Does that help? So I reject the idea that God wants us to suffer so that we can learn lessons. But God can use our suffering to teach us things, right? Sometimes we lose jobs for whatever reason, right? It could literally be the economy was bad, or I made a bad decision, or the boss, is an atheist and hates my church. It could be a million things, and God can use those situations to teach us things. Does that help? Yeah, good question. Very good. What else? Daryl.
So I found so obviously I've got a business, and especially in the beginning of the business, when I started the business, I was praying very hard, living from hand to mouth, month to month. And then the next year, I got a big order, and I got all this money in the bank. And strangely, I stopped having to trust God for everything at the end of the month. Yeah. And that money ran out pretty quickly. And then I went through a period where I really had to figure out again how to trust God again, because of I put my trust in the money and not in God. And I went through it. Was a lesson that I had to learn. Obviously now I'm still praying and trusting God, and it's been obviously a long journey.
Yeah.
But I've really learned something through that. Is that even when it's going good, you still got to just keep on. Otherwise, God will make a way for you to have to pray.
Man, God teaches us some painful things sometimes. Pastor Shannon.
Pastor, obviously you mentioned the mistake sometimes Christians make of thinking that being poor is spiritual. There's actually a scripture that I would like for you to help me make sense of it. It's in Luke 16:25, where it's the old parable of Lazarus, and not the story that Jesus shares. Where in verse 25, Abraham actually says something to the rich man that ended up in hell. He says, son, remember that you have received your good things on earth, and Lazarus evil things, who was obviously the poor man. But now he is comforted and you are tormented. Can you make sense of that verse?
Make sense of the verse? Well, the problem is that we try to connect that verse to money, and it's not connected. So the very simple fact was he's saying Lazarus and the rich man, one of them was a believer, one of them was not, right? That's the simplest understanding of that scripture. I have heard people try to use that to talk about, God tormenting the rich. Of course, that's not in the Bible, right? Or God blessing the poor, which again, those are not biblical principles. But he's using it, remember Jesus' audience were the Jews. The Jews, like some of the religious people today, they viewed financial blessing as a sign of God's favor, right? And so Jesus intentionally told this story the opposite way of the way they expected it, that the rich man was in hell and the poor man was in heaven. So he was messing with their cultural preconceptions. Does that help? Good. All right, so let's move on. Let's talk about some of these poverty mindsets now. So we're going to do this. We're going to talk about 3 this morning, and then we're going to continue on the next 2 lessons discussing these. The poverty mindset, number 1, is a victim mentality. A victim mentality, right? A very practical question you should ask in life is, what part do I play in my money or my prosperity, or vice versa in my poverty? The poverty spirit says nothing. I'm a victim, right? What part do I have to play? Pastor Heimberg, how dare you suggest? I am a victim here. It's a conspiracy, right? It's evil bosses, right? It's wicked politicians, right? It's, the fat cat 1%ers, right? Those evil 1%ers. It's unfair bankers. It's unlucky circumstances. It's my neighbor hired a Sangoma, right? It's a million things, but it's not me. It's not me. It is not my decision. There's no way I could possibly ever be responsible for this. Judges 6, verse 13.
Gideon replied, "If the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? And where are all the miracles our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say the Lord brought us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to the Midianites."
That's a good question, isn't it? Right? Here's Gideon. He's hiding because the Midianites were robbing and stealing and all those things, and it's evil, and all the God's good people are broke. Where are all the miracles? That's a good question only if you ignore the truth, because the truth is, this is the book of Judges, Israel was being judged because they were disobedient. So that's the problem, this is the victim mentality. Well, where's all, Pastor Heimberg, you preached and you said blah, 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 blah. What about your decisions? So, this is the first, and might be one of the most deadly poverty mindsets, is a victim mentality. We often fail to think about things like our lack of budgeting. Oh, it got quiet in here. I know. That word budgeting, it's the longest 4-letter word in the English language, isn't it? Right? Pastor, you can't say that in church. It's not that. Right? It's not that, you might not be the best worker. There's a man I used to pastor in New Mexico. He's doing much better now. God's really helped him. But there was a season he came to me and he said, "Pastor, listen, I don't know what the deal is. It's just terrible here, the work situation, jobs." He said, "I just got fired from my 6th job in a year." Right? So first of all, that's jacked up. You went and got 6 jobs in a year, right? Which, of course, there's other people like, "I can't find a job. You're just not trying hard enough." That's a different lesson. I'll save that. You got fired, and I said, "Well, why do you?" I'm leading him along. You give people enough rope to. So why do you think you got fired from 6 jobs? I don't know. You know, the first boss, he's telling me all these stories. And I said, man, I wonder, what's the common denominator between all 6 of these jobs? And he said, man, you know, I really don't know. I said, you know what? You know, I could be wrong, but just think about this. I wonder if it's you. That was a long, uncomfortable silence. You know, it's great. Thank God he learned the lesson. He's been, you know, God's really helped him. He's gone on in ministry and God's blessed his life. But see, we don't like to think about that. It's not our impulse buying. It's not our lack of a budget. It's not our poor decisions or disobedience to God. I'm a victim. And then, of course, related to this in the victim mentality is how we view our future financial potential. You know, a poverty mentality is pessimistic and unbelieving. There's no use. I'm never going to succeed. Matthew 25, verses 24 and 25.
Then the servant who had been given 1 bag of gold came to the master and said, Master, I knew that you were a hard man. You harvest things you did not plant. You gather crops where you did not sow any seed. So I was afraid and went and hid your money in the ground. Here is your bag of gold.
So, the poverty mentality believes that all future blessing is out of your hand. Right? Here he is. He says, I knew, God, I knew you were hard, and so it's not going to work, and so here, I'm just going to give you back what's yours. I just knew it wasn't going to work. And so that's the idea, that people are in control. Why don't you get ahead? Well, nobody will listen to me. Nobody will answer when I call. Nobody will give me a job. No one will help me. I just can't get ahead. I've got to wait for someone to give me something. God controls. It's all up to him. 2 weeks ago, I shared an illustration in my sermon, and what was so shocking to me is right after I used the illustration, I had someone come talk to me, and it played out in real life, almost to the point I was like, I thought I was being set up. You ever have that feeling in life? This person came to me, and I had to challenge them, say, listen, you're asking everybody for money in the church. Listen, you've got to stop. Listen, God loves you. You can trust God. You need to, listen, this is not okay. I'm not permitting you to, the church is not a welfare program. You can't do that. And this person, when I said you need to trust God, they were like, they were disappointed in the prospect of trusting God rather than, in other words, they trust me more than they trust God. Pastor, will you give me money? Why don't you ask God? Oh, no. Why on earth would you trust this skinny little white dude more than God? That don't even make sense. But that's the poverty mindset. My only possible chance of blessing, it's out of my hands. It's someone else. Someone else has got to do it. The second poverty mindset is an entitlement mentality. Right? And this is somewhat related, right? Where does money come from? Right? I believe money comes from God. How many of you believe that this morning? Right? I know it's probably different, but back in the day, you used to get paid checks, right? They would write your name to Jonathan, and they would write $100 and 0100. And the way U.S. checks were written, it's funny because there would be a long line where you'd write the amount, and you would write the amount, $100, but then you would have to draw a line all the way across. I don't know why. I think the thought was because maybe someone else would write, and also $500 more, You draw the line, and then they'd sign it. And that signature on the bottom, I would always tell people in the U.S., that person that signed your check, that's a forgery. They didn't give you that money. God gave you that money. Listen, God gives you the power to get wealth. That's the blessing of God. But a poverty spirit says, where does money come from? It comes from someone else. If I don't have money, I just have to ask someone for it. If I don't have money, I just need to join a program that will give me, or I just expect it to be given to me. That's the entitlement mentality. The idea or the feeling or the belief that you deserve to be given something. Right now they're fighting this insane legal battle in California. Listen, California is not the real world. Right? If you think about America and you're thinking about California, trust me, you're wrong. That's not America. Now, we do have in our midst someone who escaped from California. Listen, my wife, she's wonderful. She got saved. So, California, they're right now, literally, I read in the news this morning, they're fighting this whole battle over reparations for slavery. Listen, I understand slavery was a horrific crime against humanity. But now in California, they're trying to pass a bill that if you are in the U.S., they say POC, a person of color, right? If you are a POC, that you are entitled to reparations from the government. Now, if you've looked at the demographics of the U.S., POCs, right, people of color, are a huge percentage of our population. And just yesterday, some politician said we need to give every person of color $200 million US. Now, before you buy your plane ticket, okay. The problem with politicians, I don't know if you figured this out, is that they're really bad at math, right? If you were to give every person of color in the United States $200 million US, it would not bankrupt the United States, it would bankrupt the planet. We're talking about trillions upon trillions. That money doesn't exist. It's crazy, right? But that's the mentality. You owe me. Why do I owe you? Just 'cause. Right? I mean, you ever had people ask you stuff? Right? It was funny when we were moving here, or when we first moved here, remember we used to have like hundreds of little kids that would come to the 180, right? And I remember early on, or I think, Uncle, you must bless me with 2 rand. Right? No, I must not. And then after a little while, they started saying, Uncle, you must bless me with 5 rand. It's like, man, inflation's even getting the street kids, man. Why must I? Right? But that's a mentality. You owe me. Joshua 17, verse 14.
The people of Joseph said to Joshua, "Why have you given us only one allotment and one portion for an inheritance? We are a numerous people, and the Lord has blessed us abundantly."
They're saying, you didn't give us enough. It's you. You need to give us more. What's wrong? Why haven't you blessed us? Again, Ruby Payne, she said a key difference between generational and situational poverty is attitude. In generational poverty, the mindset is generally that society owes you. They owe someone a living. In contrast, situational poverty involves an attitude of pride and often a rejection of help. Fascinating. I've encountered that. I've encountered people that they have done well in life and then they find themselves in straight circumstances. That life, it's just difficult. They're in a situational poverty. And 2 things that you find very common. First of all, they don't want to talk about it. Right? How you doing? I'm good. No, I'm good. Right? And second, they are absolutely kicking their butt trying to solve the problem. But there's a different mindset when it's generational. If it's always been like that in your family, it's more like a resignation. Hey, someone just needs to help me out. So this is the entitlement mentality. Listen, if you fail to take responsibility for your own finances, you're never going to prosper. And we'll talk about that in more depth in future lessons. And the third mindset that we'll discuss this morning before we break is feeling guilty for financial blessings. Sometimes people are blessed who don't feel that they should be blessed. People, you get a miracle job, and I've met people, they just don't feel they deserve it. You get a bonus, an inheritance, whatever it might be. There's people, they just don't feel, they feel guilty because of that. Of course, we talked about sometimes because they believe being poor is spiritual. But then what happens when financial blessings come, right? If being poor is spiritual, what happens when God blesses you? Something's wrong. I must be evil. I must be doing something wrong. You may have heard the story, and I may get some of the details wrong, but Mother Teresa famously did great work for the poor in India. She took a vow of poverty, as Catholic nuns do. And her organization made a pretty significant impact. It began to grow and grow. So a businessman saw what they were doing, saw how they were operating. That they're trying to organize all of the orphanages and all the aid out of this little office. He gave the organization a building. It was a very nice building, several stories, offices, for them to be able to do the work that they were doing. They believed they were doing for God. And so Mother Teresa, the problem is because she had a mindset that money was not spiritual. When she was given the building, she ordered that they would go in and rip out all of the plumbing. Think about that for a moment. Plumbing is good, especially in a building full of people, right? And for more reasons than taking hot showers, right? I don't want to be crude, but it's just kind of like, but in her mind, no, the blessing is evil. So we're gonna make this suffer. We're gonna make this building bad so we suffer, and then we'll be more. Listen, that's weird. That's not right. That is not the heart of God. And then, of course, there's some, they believe they're not worthy to be blessed because of past rejection. Maybe you've been told you don't deserve, or you're never going to amount to anything, right? But then you get some money. You can buy decent things, you begin to succeed, and the turmoil is, but I know who I am. I don't feel worthy. Listen, something that will help you in life is this. Accept the fact that you're not worthy of God's love. We're not. There's nothing that we're going to do where God's going to go, oh, look at them, they're amazing. There's never going to be a point when I wake up in the morning and I'm going to get an email from God, congratulations, Jonathan, now you're worthy. I will never be worthy of the death of Jesus Christ, and neither will you. But that's why it's love and it's mercy, it's God's kindness. And so many people, they really struggle with this. They feel that they shouldn't have this. Let's read again Proverbs 10:22.
The blessing of the Lord makes one rich, and he adds no sorrow with it.
Just remember that. First of all, when God forgave you for your sin, right, that wasn't because you deserved it, but that's the blessing of God. You shouldn't carry sorrow with that, carrying around condemnation. If he blesses you financially, don't let sorrow come with it, right? There's people that they don't enjoy blessing. They feel compelled to always give everything away. They're worried that one day God's going to suddenly realize they don't deserve it and take it away. Listen, that's not right. So these are just a few of the mindsets of poverty. We've got maybe just a couple of minutes for one or two questions. If you have a question this morning before we break for our morning service, let me see your hand. You got a question, Kay? Pastor Spa?
Pastor, I just want to ask a question regarding impulsive buying. Is that the spirit that can be transferred generationally to you from maybe your parents?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that is one of the poverty mindsets. But you'll see that if you grow up in a home where your parents, we used to call it retail therapy, right? I feel bad. Let's go buy something. That will definitely be passed on. You will learn that as a habit in your life. Certainly. Yes, our brother right here in the corner.
Pastor, good morning. I'd like to disagree with you on certain things.
Okay. Why don't you hold on a second? Come talk to me afterwards.
Okay.
So no worries. Sizwe, I saw your hand going up.
I think it's two questions. The first one, I just want to know your view on this. I've met someone who says my financial prosperity lies in someone blessing me.
Right.
And the second question is helping people with money. How do you get to a point where you say, listen, actually me helping you is actually hurting you and not helping you in any way?
Yeah, we'll talk about that specifically as the series goes on, but that's a crucial thing. When you are blessed, you're going to have to realize that sometimes giving money to people is hurtful. If they're not, obviously, we are called to be a blessing. We're going to talk about that. We need to be a blessing to people. But there is a time when it becomes harmful if people are not learning the lessons of seeking God. And sorry, what was your first question again?
It was when someone says, my financial prosperity lies in someone helping me financially.
Right. Well, the problem is that prosperity is not necessarily the accumulation of an amount of money, right? It literally means a thriving or a growing condition. The only way you can thrive or grow is when you learn the biblical principles of prosperity, so that you can work and earn and save and invest and grow in a godly way. So prosperity is only going to come when you learn to do those things rather than someone just giving you something. Am I answering your question? Okay. Very good. All right, we're going to break. Service begins in 5 minutes.